Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers. I'm Ryan Wall, joined by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, since we last spoke, Arizona beat number 12 Auburn. They had moved to 8-0 on the season, and for the 40th time in the history of the program, Arizona is ranked number one in the latest AP poll, third time in the Tommy Lloyd era. So just unbelievable stuff. They finally get the recognition that they have earned throughout the first few months of the season. How are you doing? And what did you think of this big win for Arizona over the Tigers?
I'm doing great. To comment on the number one ranking, what took so long? Why did it take Purdue to land a whole goose egg against a good Iowa State team? I really don't know how good they are. It's just Purdue. It's really the first great team Purdue's played outside of Alabama. So we'll see what the rest of the season kind of brings in accordance with that. But it's good to see Arizona at the top of the board. I know some people are a little questioning as the USA Today coaches poll put Michigan number one over Arizona, who's played some great games, but I think we can both clearly say that Arizona's resume is just pretty uncomparable to really anybody else's right now in the country.
Yeah, Arizona has beat four top 25 teams, and Michigan's been on a great run. They have been dominating and just blowing teams out, but they haven't beat the teams that Arizona has, and no team has. And Arizona is rightfully the number one best team in the country in college basketball. Let's get into this win against Auburn. Arizona 97, Auburn 68, and Arizona had five players in double figures, but they also had six guys score eight plus. Were led by Koa Pete with 18 points, 8 for 11 from the field, five assists, four rebounds, two steals, one block. He was just spectacular, as he always seems to be in these big games. And Arizona, they held Auburn to 68 points, and they really kind of pulled away from Auburn in the second half. What stood out to you in this one?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is especially mainly the assists difference. Auburn's 7 assists to Arizona's 23. Or sorry, was it seven? Was it 15? Yeah, it was seven.
Yeah, it was
And
seven.
and just the ability to be able to just play the game as it comes to you and be able to be selfless and to feed your teammates, I think is just huge. This team has continued from game to game, no matter who they're playing, where they're playing. They play above their age and they play above their ranking. And this team is just they just seem to have little to no weaknesses.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly there. It doesn't seem like they have weaknesses because they have so many great guards. They have great veterans. They have great freshmen. And although the story a lot from this team this season has been Koa Pete, rightfully so, he's been spectacular in so many big games. But I want to talk about some of the surrounding freshmen, and that is Ivan Karchenkov, and that is Braden Berries and Dwayne Aristo. These other freshmen have been legit contributors and haven't played like normal freshmen. These guys are contributing at a very high level. Karchenkov, probably his best game in his collegiate career. 12 points, 5 for 9 shooting, two three-pointers, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, 3 steals. The 8 assists really stood out to me because he was getting the ball to Koa P. He was getting the ball to his other teammates and finding other ways to make an impact. And even when he wasn't scoring or finding opportunities for himself, he was finding opportunities for others. And I was just very impressed with him. What do you think of Karchenkov in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think his skill level is pretty remarkable with how big he is. I know his position puts him at a four, but his skill, it feels like on most days he could play as a two with his shooting. He's got really good ball handling and like in the assist tell, 8 assists, that's a crazy thing. And he's had some pretty flashy passes too. He's been likened to Payla Larson and Dalen Terry of being kind of this glue guy and I think that's kind of underselling how good he is, and I think it's just kind of how big some of the 5-star names are and some of the older veterans are. I think he's really, as much as he can have like a role and play in his role, like he's going to be a big reason why this team can make a really deep run into March with just how versatile he can play as being so skillful at his size.
Yeah, and especially surprising to see guys like him and Dwayne Aristode play at this high of a level early on because they weren't the five-star guys. They weren't as highly touted as Burries and Cole Pete were. Those guys were coming in day one as starters and expected to be major contributors. So to get Karchenkov with 12 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, and then Aristode who had 8 points in 13 minutes. So those are just really unexpected, and when you get those performances, it really takes the upside and the potential of this team just up a whole notch. And overall, when you have Koa Pete 18, Burries and Bradley 16 apiece, when the scoring is that well rounded and even, it just makes this team very tough to beat. And it's why Arizona pulled away from Auburn in the second half because of the ability they have on the running the fast break and getting it to their big men, Krivas and Pete, and getting everyone involved and making it that nobody is bigger than the team. It's all about the team. It's all about finding the open player. It's all about making the right play. And it seems like every player is playing winning basketball right now.
Definitely. It gives other opposing coaches kind of bald headed syndrome because they just want to pull their hair out. Who do you stop? Who do you defend? Like, okay, we're going to take Koa Pete out of the game like Cronin did. It's like, okay, it took him a little bit. Okay, Del Orso's hot. We're going to feed him. Bang. They go on a big run. Oh, okay, like let's try to stop them from three. Bang, they're going to go inside. Okay, let's crowd inside. Okay, now we got guys shooting from three. It's just nearly impossible with the way this team's been playing against these great, t- talented teams that they're playing to just get stopped. They just haven't. They've taken punches wherever they've come from and they've adjusted. It's been remarkable to see.
Yeah, before this game, we were discussing about whether Arizona would be a couple point favorite, and we were both kind of shocked that Arizona was over a 9 point favorite in this one. But I think that is a testament to the level that this team plays and how they play against the great teams because the best teams, the elite of the elite, and the teams that are number one in the country, like Arizona, they're not just supposed to win close games. They're supposed to, when they get a top 15 team at their house, they're supposed to blow them out of the water. And Arizona did just that. They proved that every facet, every area of the game, defense, offense, and just having the well-rounded roster that's needed for these type of games, that they're just a step ahead, not just of Auburn, who was ranked 20 heading into this one, but against every other top team they've played. And a thing that I was very that didn't catch me off guard, but it was great to see was although Auburn did have the highest score in this game with Todd Pettiford, who had 30, he was spectacular in this one. No, only one other player for the Tigers had over 10 points. So Arizona didn't let one player's performance kind of beat them, and they decided, oh, if he's going to make the shots, that's fine. We're just going to shut every single other player down for Auburn.
Yeah, definitely. And if you can be able to do that and do that well, that it works for you. And I want to kind of speak one thing that we kind of really haven't talked about is just how great of a job that Tommy's done with adjustments in game with these things. And like I've said, like they've taken punches and teams have thrown specific game plans at them, but they've adjusted on the fly almost seamlessly. Like in the UCLA game I mentioned with Koa Pete and the UConn game when Reed was hurt. Okay, they pounded them inside on the boards, inside the paint scoring. And in this game early, I thought the biggest thing that was the difference maker when they were able to kind of get to a lead and extend it was there were high end turnovers, 13 turnovers. That felt like a majority of all those were in the first half, and Auburn was able to use those and get in transition and try to run. And that's one thing I thought that they knew they had to do. They had to get those high percentage shots in transition. And the second Arizona kind of protected the ball a little bit better and stopped Auburn in their transition. I thought that was really the big moment when this game really flipped into Arizona be able to build a lead and then blow the roof off of McHale.
Yeah, great point there. And Tommy, a thing that he has excelled at, and it's him building this roster and having 8 guys that can play interchangeably and they all can make an impact. And when you have Mo Krivas, who may struggle at times and does has got in the foul trouble, Arizona, that's one knock if you want to. Arizona has had a lot of their best players get in the foul trouble. In this game, Koapi, Krivas both had 3 fouls. You had Braden Berries and you had Toby Awaka both have 4 fouls. So when that happens, you need to have the next guy up come in and not have that much of a drop off. And they've had just that. And I think that is where this team has excelled. Every player that stepped foot on this floor for Arizona, especially in this game versus Auburn, they just made an impact. And this was to me one of their best performances of the season because as we keep mentioning, they didn't just beat them when the game was close for those first 5 to 10 minutes of the game. Arizona just pulled away even into the second half while they were up by over 10 points at halftime, and when they entered the second, it was over before you know it. Any other final thoughts on this game against Auburn?
Yeah, I think one of the things you talked about with their depth, it just feels like this team in their roles and how well they play into them. It just feels like I feel like from game to game, I don't really feel like there's ever a guy that I've just been like, wow, this guy played a terrible game and everybody else had to pick up the slack. I think it tends that usually it's like, oh well, 7 guys played so well and I almost completely forgot this guy got 15 minutes. Like I feel like Toby Awaka has kind of been in that lane most of this season outside I felt like the UConn game. It's like wow, he actually had a really good game, and I didn't really notice it because everybody else played like really well. And so I think that's an amazing thing, especially when and I think a big media narrative thing is like we don't have a guy that like has the name, and it's the last 2 years it was Caleb Love, Caleb Love, Caleb Love. Oh, he had a great game. Arizona won big. They're great. Oh, Caleb Love had a bad game. Oh, Arizona's not very good. And I think that's one thing that's just so I don't want to say great because then it makes the other team sound not great, but it's just different and it's something I don't feel like we've really had lately, especially over the last 4 years. It was like there's one or two names
Yep.
where like they had to play good, or if they did play good and everything went kind of crazy. It felt like Kirk Kriisa, like all of his time here, it was like okay, like he plays like crap. Okay, we need to get him off the court. It's
Yeah,
like
and
well, we
that
don't
that
really
that
have
yeah,
another point guard.
I I agree with that, and that to me is what makes this team better. Is because
Yes.
they can win in so many different ways. They can win close games. They can blow teams out. They can win games where they make no 3 pointers, where they make six like they did in this one, which is a little above their average. And that is the benefit of having so many players that can help you because they're not as reliant on one guy. They're not reliant like you mentioned Caleb Love. They're not reliant on it seemed like if he could have 25, 30, they have a shot against anybody. They don't need that. They don't need Jaden Bradley or Cole Pete to score 20 plus. They just need those 2 guys to play well, and they need their surrounding pieces to just contribute to some extent. But Arizona won this one 97-68. If you would have told me before the game that they would have won this game by nearly 30 points, I wouldn't believe you. I thought this was going to be a lot closer. But Arizona now is at 8-0. And before this game, we talked about heading into the end of 2025 because after their game against Alabama, they do play San Diego State on December 20th, but they don't have the toughest schedule before the calendar year ends. So there's a real shot Arizona could head into 2026 13-0. But Jordan, I wanted to ask you when you look down the Big 12 schedule, after they play number 12 Alabama on December 13th, their next game against the top 25 team is against number 10 BYU on January 26th. So, do you think there's any sort of chance that this winning streak could last a long more time here?
I definitely do, and it's still early to say that because there's still a lot of these Big 12 teams that we don't really know a ton about. I know TCU, they had a good stretch in their holiday week tournament when they beat Wisconsin, and I can't remember if it was the Myers one or a different one, but they beat two teams back to back to have some really great wins. And so there's still not really a ton that we know about a lot of these teams. And even me, like I thought they were gonna really struggle through their early slate against all these ranked teams. But I think right now I'm probably more so siding on the bandwagon that they could be undefeated until that merciless February Big 12 slate kind of comes at them like a train.
Yeah, I think they very well could. I do think, and we talked about before the season, this game versus Alabama being one of the tougher games because of the elite coaching, as you mentioned, with Nate Oates, and they do have some really good veterans. And although it's not on the campus of Alabama, it still is taking place in Birmingham, Alabama. So it should be majority of Alabama fans not like the game against UCLA or against Florida that were technically neutral sites. But let's get into Arizona's game against Alabama this Saturday. It's on ESPN 9:30 on the East Coast, 7:30 Tucson time, and this series right now stands Alabama up 3-2 over Arizona. Arizona won the last game back in December of 2023. That one was in Phoenix. Arizona won by 13. This is the first time they're playing in the state of Alabama since 2018. Alabama won that one. How do you see this one playing out, Jordan?
Yeah, I think this one's going to be a really high scoring game. Nate Oates, he's a huge analytics guy. I listened to a podcast recently where he was talking about the 3% difference within a foot of shooting away from the 3 point line to shooting with almost a toe on it, and just the delicacy and the analytics and the brain power that he brings to the basketball is just something that's really, I think it's kind of cool. A lot of people are super anti analytics, but I think it's a really cool and interesting way to kind of think about the game. And they really jump up the pace, and Arizona, I think they could give a few different options of whether they want to do that. And I think probably, as you will agree, probably some of their front court, they probably match up quite a bit better than Alabama does. So I could see a reason for Tommy Lloyd kind of wanting to slow down some of the pace in this game, because that's kind of where Alabama usually, I would say, definitely not over, pretty much overplays to an extent, because
Yeah.
it gives them a lot of quick and easy threes to get into, and it also puts them downhill because that's their game. They want to do pick and rolls on the wings and at the top of the key. If they can get a layup, if they can get a roll, then they're kicking out for it's an open three. If that's either with a guy's hand up 2 feet away, or if that's a guy right in his face kind of pulling up, because I just feel like we're watching Alabama. It's usually 3 to 5 times a game. You're just like, how did he make that three? Either if it's 5 feet behind the 3 point line, or a guy's hand right in his face. So Nate Oates does an incredible job of developing guys to shoot, and recruiting the right guys and changing up their mechanics.
Yeah, they do, and they are just such an elite offensive team. And since they lost their last game against number 12 Gonzaga, they won four straight, scoring 90 plus in all four of them. They did lose two games this season. They're 7-2, but they did lose to number two Purdue at the time, 87-80, and to Gonzaga by 10 points. But I mentioned this Alabama team is just an elite offensive group. They have five guys scoring in double figures. They have eight guys scoring 9+ points. So they really have that depth that I talked about with Arizona. Alabama has a ton of depth too. LeBaron Filion is leading the way with 21.4 points, seventh highest in the country right now. They also have Aiden Holloway, who is averaging over 18 a game. He is just spectacular this season. And the drop off is a little much after those two, but those are their two stars. And I think if Arizona can slow those two guys down in the first half, I think they could find success. And I think Arizona has the tools to slow them down with Braden Berries, with Jaden Bradley, who's a very good defensive player, and I think they match up well with these players. And I think the biggest difference maker in this game, as much as both teams have good offenses, is Arizona's defense because they have the 10th highest defensive rating according to Ken Palm. And when you look at Alabama's, they have the 47th highest defensive rating. So I think that I give Arizona the edge because Arizona, since they allowed 87 points to Florida in their first game, their last 7 games, they've allowed 73 points or fewer. So this Arizona team is not just beating teams, but they're shutting teams down and they're not allowing any of their offense to produce. And I think that is the difference maker here against Alabama. Do you think Arizona could beat Alabama on the road, or do you think the Crimson Tide could hand Arizona their first loss?
I think the way Alabama plays with living and dying by the 3 point line, anything can happen because those just looking at percentages, like if you can get a few guys hot and those percentages can just go up like crazy, that you can beat really anybody. And I think about probably the biggest upset in the NCAA tournament history when UMBC beat Virginia. It was like UMBC just shot over 50% from the 3 point line, and at that point, it's not really who has the best players. It's just a math game. Three's more than two on a lot of possessions, and so it'll be interesting to see. I think if Alabama gets a little bit of a lead, I think with just how they play and the tempo they bring, I think it'll be interesting to see how Arizona kind of responds to that. Like we've said, like they really don't like to shoot a ton of threes. I think probably the most they've shot has been around 15, and I would be surprised if Alabama's probably shot less than that and a half. And that's just the way they play. And so I think this will be a really up and down, high scoring game. I'm really excited for it, and I think I'd put the spread right around 2.5. And I think I would be confident taking Arizona right at that at a possession or two for this win.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And although Alabama did have two top 10 wins against St. John's and Illinois early, they have struggled against a couple top 12 teams, and I think it's because, like you said, when you live and die by the three, that to me is just not a great recipe against elite teams and against elite defensive teams like Arizona, because they have the physicality to match up with Auburn or Alabama. They have the guards to match up with them, and I think if they are aggressive towards the 3 point line and don't allow them to get in too many open shots, that's where I favor Arizona in this one because we've seen too many of these elite offenses go into these games with Arizona, and Arizona just shuts them down and doesn't allow them to get what they want. Although I do think this will be tougher than Auburn, I got Arizona winning this one. And until a team shows they can keep up with this Arizona team for 40 minutes, I'm not going against them yet. Well, do you have any other final thoughts between this matchup with Arizona and Alabama?
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, we talked about kind of the neutral sites in these games that Arizona's played against some of these great teams, and this is really one of the first times. And you said 2018 was the last time they played in Alabama. That's probably a true road game, but Arizona, I would say athletics in general doesn't really get tons of time really down in the south part of America. I think it was 2023. I went down to a Mississippi State Arizona game, and there wasn't tons of Arizona people. There was a few, so I'm curious to see kind of the fan support. I would be expecting of about 75-80% of the crowd to be Alabama. Birmingham's about 2.5 hours from Tuscaloosa. But it'll be interesting. It's very different compared to like UCLA, where Arizona's had a lot of just basketball guys from the Bay Area and from Southern Cal, and a lot of the California kids like going out to the desert outside of California and going to school. So it'll definitely be a very different kind of neutral site game for Arizona. I'm excited to see kind of what the crowd looks like and how high scoring this game can be on Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this one because this is the final game, as I mentioned, between Arizona against the fellow ranked team for quite some time here. They don't play their next ranked team after this one until late January. It's Arizona, it's Alabama, it's at 9:30 Eastern time, 7:30 back in Tucson. It's Tommy Lloyd, it's Nate Oates. This should just be spectacular. We're both backing Arizona in this one. But that's all we have time for today, Jordan. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today's episode of Bear Down Ballers. I'm Ryan Wall. He's Jordan Pollock.